Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Great to be back.
We're really excited today. We're going to dive into something super important in negotiation. How you actually make sure that yes turns into action.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at Chapter 8 of Never Split the Difference. It's called Guarantee Execution.
Guarantee execution. Love that. So it's not just about getting them to agree, right? It's about the follow-through.
That's the whole point. Getting the yes is, step one. But the real win, the actual results, that comes from making sure the agreement actually happens. This chapter gives us some really solid ways to do that.
Okay, so let's kick off with a story that really drives this home. The book talks about a warden hostage crisis. Sounds intense.
Oh, it was. Picture this. St. Martin Parish, Louisiana. A prison siege. Inmates have hostages, including the warden.
Wow.
And the situation's really volatile. Part of the problem was the inmates themselves weren't, super organized. That made things even more unpredictable, dangerous.
Sounds like a nightmare scenario for negotiators. What was the inmates' main concern, according to the negotiators?
Well, obviously they were in deep trouble. But the negotiators figured out their biggest fear wasn't just the legal stuff.
No, what then?
It was fear of retribution, what would happen after they surrendered, fear of getting targeted by other inmates for, taking the warden hostage.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. A very specific internal fear. So how did the team tackle that?
They came up with a pretty clever plan, actually. It's centered around a walkie-talkie.
A walkie-talkie? How?
The idea was one inmate surrenders first, walks through all the police lines, gets into the transport vehicle,
Okay.
and then he uses the walkie-talkie to call back inside, to tell the others, hey, I made it through, they treated me okay. It was about giving them real-time proof.
That's smart. Building trust right there in the moment.
Yeah.
But things didn't go smoothly, did they?
No, that's where it almost fell apart. So the first guy does his part, walks out, goes through the checkpoints.
Yeah.
But right as he's about to get in the transport, a SWAT officer grabs the walkie-talkie, confiscates it.
Oh, no. And the officer didn't know the plan.
Apparently not, or didn't understand how crucial that specific device was. Suddenly, the line goes dead for the guys inside.
You can just feel the panic rising. Their proof, their confirmation of safety, gone.
Totally. The negotiator still inside is hearing pure panic. Threats start flying again. We'll hurt the hostages. It got really bad, really fast.
So what did the negotiators do? Scramble?
Big time. They had to rush over, explain frantically why that specific walkie-talkie was essential. Took some tense moments, but eventually the officer came back with it. Apparently, he had no idea what he'd almost caused.
Wow. Close call. And it really hammers home the point, doesn't it? The deal wasn't done when they agreed to the plan.
Exactly. That's the core lesson here. The negotiation wasn't truly over, wasn't successful, until those hostages were actually safe. The agreement was just the start. It proves the chapter's main idea. Yes is nothing without how.
Right. That yes is potential, but the how, the implementation, that's the reality. The chapter kind of ranks levels of commitment, too.
Yeah, it lays it out nicely. Like, a verbal yes is okay, a signed contract, better.
But the real deal.
A signed check, basically. Something tangible showing execution. That's where the real profit, the real success lies in the follow-through.
Okay, so let's look at another scenario the book uses. Very different context. The kidnapping of Jose in Ecuador.
Right. Jose, an American guy running an ecotour business down there with his wife, Julie, leading a rafting trip in 2003 near the Colombian border.
And he gets kidnapped by rebels.
Exactly, just snatched. A terrifying situation.
And there's this really touching moment mentioned, Julie's parting words.
Yeah, powerful. Just remember, no matter what happens, I love you. Sets the stage for her strength through the whole ordeal.
Absolutely. Now, this case introduces a key technique. Calibrated how questions. What was the strategy behind using those here?
Two main things, really. First, buy time. Just stall. Which, spoiler alert, turned out to be super important.
Okay, buy time. And second,
Shift the burden. Make the kidnappers figure out the problems. By constantly asking how about their demands, Julie forces them to think about the practicalities from her side without her ever having to say a flat no.
can you give some examples? What kind of how questions did Julie actually use?
Oh, yeah. So, first contact, the crucial one. How do I know Jose is alive? Got to establish proof of life.
Right, essential.
Then they demand $5 million. Her response, how can we possibly raise that much money?
Framing it as her problem to solve.
Exactly. Then how can we pay you anything until we know Jose is okay? And later, even when the ransom drops, she keeps going, how am I supposed to manage that? I'd have to sell her cars or trucks.
Each one avoids a direct confrontation, but highlights a real obstacle for her. It's not just saying no, it's showing why it's difficult or impossible.
Precisely. And it worked. It kept the kidnapper talking, thinking he was in control because he had to answer her questions. But really, it was slowing everything down, giving her leverage, driving the ransom down significantly.
And then, the unexpected happens. Jose escapes. Was that connected to Julie's strategy?
Well, the FBI and Julie felt the time bought by the negotiation could create an opportunity. The delays, the lower ransom, probably meant fewer guards eventually. And during a heavy rainstorm, the one guard left fell asleep.
And Jose saw his chance.
He did. He got away. So Julie's insight was key. Give it enough time, and Jose might find a way.
So the how questions didn't just negotiate the ransom, they potentially created the conditions for escape.
That's incredible.
It really shows the power. It influences the whole situation, not just the terms on the table.
The book calls how questions a gentle way to say no. Explain that a bit more.
Think about the $5 million question. How can we possibly raise that? She's not saying, no, that's ridiculous, which might just shut things down.
Right.
Instead, she's saying, explain to me the pathway to achieving your demand, because I don't see one. It makes them confront the unreasonableness of it, often leading them to adjust. It feels less like rejection, more like problem solving. That's a great way to put it. And this links to forced empathy. What's that about?
Okay, so forced empathy is when you ask a question like, how am I supposed to do that? It kind of gently forces the other person to step into your shoes for a moment.
To see it from your side.
Yeah. Especially if you've already shown them some empathy. It leverages reciprocity. The book notes the FBI started using this heavily in ransom cases. It works.
And it's not just for kidnapping. There's the Kelly story, the
Yeah.
consultant.
Kelly, the accounting consultant, had a client who owed her money but kept asking for more work. Classic problem.
So what did she do?
Next time the client asked, she just used the line, I'd love to help, but how am I supposed to do that? Simple, direct. It forced the client to acknowledge the unpaid bills. And guess what?
She got paid.
She got paid. It translates across situations.
That's brilliant. So how questions aren't just defensive, they're crucial for making sure the agreement actually works, for implementation.
Absolutely. When you get them to articulate how something will be done, they start to own it. It becomes their plan, not just something you pushed on them. People stick to their own plans better.
Like the book says, the art of letting someone else have your way.
Exactly that.
So what are the go-to how questions for locking down that implementation?
The chapter highlights two big ones. How will we know we're on track? And how will we address things if we find we're off track?
Planning for success and potential problems.
Right. And then the key step, summarize their answers. Keep summarizing until you hear them say, that's right. That's the magic phrase. That means they genuinely agree and understand.
Not just you're right. The book warns about that one.
Yeah, you're right. Can often just be a way to get you off their back. It's passive, doesn't show real buy-in. Same with, I'll try.
I'll try, the classic sign of maybe not trying too hard.
Exactly. If you hear those, you got to circle back. More how questions until they define success, until you get that. That's right.
Got it. Make them own the solution. Okay, now shifting gears slightly, the chapter talks about people not at the table, the level 2 players. Why are they so important for execution?
Because the people you're talking to rarely operate in a vacuum. There are always others, bosses, colleagues, legal teams, whoever, who can influence whether an agreement actually gets implemented. They can be deal killers even if they weren't in the room.
So you need to negotiate with them too, in a way, or at least account for them.
You absolutely need to account for them. Understand their interests, there's potential objections. Ignoring them is risky.
So how do you uncover what these behind-the-scenes people are thinking?
Ask questions that broaden the perspective. Things like, how does this affect the rest of your team? Or how on board are the people not on this call? Maybe what do your colleagues see as the main challenges here? Get your counterpart talking about the wider context.
That prison siege example comes back here, right? The SWAT officer.
Perfect example. One person, not fully briefed, almost derailed the whole thing. You have to consider everyone who might touch the execution phase.
And the author shares a personal story, too, about losing a deal.
Yeah, a training deal. They had a CEO, head of HR, totally sold, but they forgot someone crucial, the head of the actual division getting the training. He wasn't consulted, felt bypassed, and just nixed the whole thing.
Ouch. Lesson learned.
Definitely. You got to ask, How does this affect everybody else? How do we make sure the managers are on board? You need that wider buy-in for execution.
It's about seeing the whole playing field, not just the person across from you. Okay, the chapter wraps up with some broader tactics, spotting liars, dealing with difficult people. How does this tie back specifically to guaranteeing execution?
Well, it all comes down to assessing sincerity, right? Are they really committed to doing what they say they'll do? So you need tools to gauge that.
Like the 738-55 rule about words, tone, body language.
Exactly. The idea is how someone says something and their body language while saying it tells you a lot more than just the words themselves. Pay attention to mismatches.
If their words say yes, but their tone says maybe not.
That's a red flag for implementation. You can use labels here. It seems like you're saying yes, but maybe there's some hesitation. Gently call it out to see what's really going on.
And the rule of 3, how does that help ensure follow-through?
It's about confirming commitment. Get them to agree to the same key point 3 different times using different methods.
Yeah.
First, the initial agreement. Second, maybe you summarize it and get that's right. Third, ask a specific how or what question about implementing that specific point. If they agree consistently 3 times, it's much more likely to be genuine, less likely to fall apart later.
Okay, makes sense. Triangulating the truth. What about the Pinocchio effect or pronouns?
Yeah, quickly on the idea is liars sometimes use more words, more third-person pronouns, they, them, to distance themselves.
Interesting.
And pronoun usage can hint at authority. Someone saying I all the time might have less actual power to implement than someone who avoids I and talks more about we or the team, tells you who else might be involved.
And the Chris discount, just using your own name.
Huh? Yeah. Simple but effective sometimes. Using your first name humanizes you, builds a little connection, might make them more inclined to work with you, maybe even give a small concession. Can't hurt, right?
Worth a try. Okay, finally, that multi-step no. Getting them to bid against themselves. That sounds powerful for execution, too, maybe by setting realistic terms up front.
Definitely. It's about shaping the deal before you even agree. Instead of jumping straight to a hard no, you use a sequence.
Walk us through it again.
Starts gentle. How am I supposed to do that? Then, I'm sorry, that just doesn't work for me. Then, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I just can't do that. And only if needed, a firm but respectful, I'm sorry, no.
And the effect.
Each step pressures them gently to reconsider their position, maybe adjust their offer, without you having to make a counter yet. The story about Jesus Brino helping his brother buy a business. They used this sequence, combined with specific numbers, and got the seller to come way down. It sets the stage for an executable deal.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, let's try and wrap this up. Thinking about this whole chapter, guaranteeing execution. What are the absolute key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, the big one, the headline, yes, is nothing without how. Negotiation doesn't end at the handshake.
It's just the beginning, really.
Right. And the tools to get to how are things like asking those calibrated how questions over and over, using how am I supposed to do that as your gentle no, remembering to figure out who the behind-the-table players are, paying attention to tone and body language, that 738-55 idea.
Testing commitment.
Yeah, using the rule of 3, watching pronouns, using your name, and using that staircase of no's to let them negotiate with themselves sometimes.
Yeah.
It's all about ensuring the agreement actually translates into action.
This has been fantastic. Really practical insights into making negotiations actually deliver. Thanks so much for breaking it all down.
My pleasure. It's crucial stuff. Knowing how to get the yes is good. Knowing how to guarantee the execution is even better.
Absolutely. And for all of you listening, we really hope this gives you some concrete strategies you can use, whether it's a big business deal or just figuring out plans with someone. Make sure that yes has a how behind it.
That's the goal.
Definitely join us next time. We'll be diving into another really interesting area of communication and negotiation. You won't want to miss it.